imagine conservatives being on board with a bill that takes your tax dollars to pay insurance companies. That's not small government. That's a disaster. That's the same kind of thing that conservatives were screaming and yelling about how that's illegal and how can we do something like that. I mean, there is such thing as compromise, right? But I completely understand how something like that is not something you
But what about the pushback to the states? I mean, to me, I see it as they're saying, look, let's let the states do their own Medicaid expansion. And that, and that to me is one of the most important tenets of this bill, that this is going to push it back to the states and let the states take up their costs and let the governors and the legislatures do their job of prioritizing their spending.
Okay, Eric, let me ask you this. Somewhere between, I'll have to say, to me, it sounds a little optimistic that they're not that far apart from yes. That's just my take. But Eric, to Cap's point, nobody wants to be a purist. You can afford to be a purist on the issue, but we also can't just afford something that looks a whole lot like Obamacare. It really doesn't work out for me.
So something as important as healthcare, and this is 1/6 to 1/7 of the economy, depending on who you talk to. And there are two areas: there's policy and politics. Under policy, I'm going to disagree with you 100%, Bill. I think this is terrible policy. I'm going to agree with Kat in that it doesn't address the most important part of the healthcare problem, and it's the cost of healthcare, not health insurance, but the cost of healthcare. You have to drive the underlying commodity costs down. You have to, in order for it to work. And Kat's right. All this bill does is takes taxpayer dollars, throw it at people and say, look, it's going to cost you a little bit less. It's not. It's costing taxpayers a lot more. The politics of it, very quickly, the politics of it, it lets the Democrats off the hook, Ebony. The Democrats were on the hook for an awful health care bill. Everyone hated Obamacare. There's like 10% of the population that thinks this was a good idea. And now what they've done is they've transferred that hate from the Democrats onto the GOP. It's insanity.
Well, I agree, and Danielle, I want to get you in here, but that is certainly the argument that many Dems were hoping that this would be the scenario, right? That, you guys sat, you asked, you begged, you pleaded to have your hand in healthcare, and here you go.
Right, here you go, and there are 23 million people likely to be without insurance over the next 6 to 10 years. In defense of Obamacare, I will say that it did, to your point here, try to increase efficiencies within the marketplace and the oil. So there's a real problem.
And what the GOP did was made it a bigger entitlement.
Yeah, it's an entitlement program, including an entitlement program for insurance companies, which, by the way, they're doing just fine on their
It's
own.
been that from go. And I think the challenge here is that the same people that are the drivers of this, you're right, they're not addressing costs, but let's face it, a lot of the same naysayers were fighting against prescription drugs coming in from Canada, which we know lower cost.